All right, we are on air and live with special guest Ariel Lawhon, who is not just the author of the Broadway Mistress, but also a genuine one. So you guys joining.
You are breaking up on me, so I can't totally hear you.
What the book's about and take questions from you because you guys are the ones who need to know more. Ariel, can you hear me? Make sure we're live and
I can hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you now. You were breaking up and frozen on me just a minute ago, but it looks like we're okay now.
I don't hear her. Ariel? For some reason,
I'm here. Can you hear me? Are you there, Mary Beth?
Ariel, we try that again.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay.
The question from Jade. She says, you've gotten great reviews in People Magazine, the New York Times Book Review, etc. What do you think makes this book stand out, and what was it like when you got word that it was a success? Great question, Jade. Thank you. I think people resonate with the fact that it's based on a true story. When we think of stories, there's a part of us that really likes the idea that something is true, that it really happened, and that the people that we're reading about really existed and went through these struggles and trials that we see on the page. And I think, or my guess would be, the fact that I took real people from history and put them in a fictional world while staying as true to their stories as possible was something that really resonated with a lot of people. When you read, you tend to think that you know the characters in the book, and there's an added value to knowing that those people were real, that they really existed. So that would be my guess. I think that's why it resonated with people. And when I got word that those two venues in particular, People Magazine and People Magazine and the New York Times, it was amazing. I've read both papers and magazine for a long time, and to know that their reviewers got the book was such a relief, and I was very grateful for it, because you just never know. Reading is subjective, and you never know if a particular reviewer at a particular outlet will like your book or not, but I was very grateful to know that they did. Oh gosh, how long did it take to write The Wife and the Maid and the Mistress? Technically, from the first moment that I thought of the book until I had a finished manuscript on my hand was 7 years. But I had a couple babies during that time, and so that tends to slow me down. But the actual writing, in terms of sitting down in front of a computer every day, was about a year and a half. And my husband and I have 4 very little boys, and my writing time is often mixed in with other things. And so I would have to write in small doses every day, but it took about a year and a half total to get the first draft of the manuscript done. Oh, and thank you, by the way. I'm so glad you liked the book. Let's see. Marina asked, Your book features 3 narrators, a concept I love and think you did exceptionally well. What prompted you to write it in 3 different voices? Great question. It didn't start that way. I think all books, it takes time for you to really figure out how to tell them. And as I began researching and figuring out the main events in the story, I realized that it really needed to be told from 3 different perspectives. On one hand, I feel like the story is really Stella's story, the judge's wife. I feel like she's the backbone of the narrative. But in real life, she spent so much time at her lake house in Maine that she was removed from what was really happening on the ground in New York in the days following the judge's disappearance. And I knew I needed other voices and other perspectives that were there with him. And so as I wrote and as time went on, I incorporated the voice of the maid and the mistress as well. See, Duncan says he loved the book. Thank you, Duncan. I think you, along with your characters, have made a long-lasting impression. But what if you could go back and change something about one of the characters? What change would that be? Oh, really good question. I don't know that I would change the characters per se. I might have spent a little bit more time with them, or the maid to me is one that I would have loved to see a little bit more time on the page. I think Maria had such an interesting role in the story, and it would have been fun to know more about her. But I don't think I would have changed the characters themselves. Yes, Rose asked a great question. Mary Beth, are you here? Are you back online yet? I'm not sure if Mary Beth has gotten her connection again, but Rose says you're the co-founder of shereads.org. Can you talk a bit about that experience and how that idea came alive? Great question, and I'm very glad you asked it. It's something Mary Beth and I wanted to discuss as well. She Reads has actually been in existence for 5 years this summer, so we're about to hit our 5th anniversary, and it sprang into being because Mary Beth and I, in our own lives, I lived in Texas at the time and she was in North Carolina, found that we were constantly recommending books to friends. And we'd have a friend come over and they'd look at our bookshelf and they'd say, "What should I read?" And both of us were kind of throwing books at our friends and saying, "Here, read this one, read The Help, or Water for Elephants, or Time Traveler's Wife." And we realized that the people in our personal lives really trusted our opinion on books. And we thought, well, let's take this online, let's expand it and share the idea on a broader scale. And so, on a much smaller scale than we're doing now, we began picking books as book club selections and sharing them online with readers. And it grew from that small idea. Chloe asked, where do you do your writing? Do you listen to music or have a snack while you're eating? You were actually looking at where I do my writing. I've never had an office, which I would love to have an office one day. But like I said, my husband and I have quite a few boys, and so they tend to take up all the spare room in the house. But I've always written in my room, or at the kitchen table, or in the living room. Snacks. I don't know if you consider coffee a snack, but I drink huge amounts of coffee. It's kind of sad, actually. I think I gained 7 pounds writing this book because I drank so much coffee and had so much cream and sugar in it. And music, it's funny, actually, a good question. I do listen to music when I write, usually to drown out the noise of small children in the house. When I'm drafting a book, when I'm actually writing for the first time, it has to be instrumental. If there's lyrics, I can't concentrate on the page in front of me. But when I go back and I do the revisions, I listen to Mumford and Sons or various rock and roll stations on Pandora. In the revision stage, I need something with a beat, something with some life to it, so I stay awake and concentrate. Great question, Crystal. She says, you blog. What's the difference between blogging and writing a book? Do you ever have blog regret? Like you shouldn't have posted something that you thought was good at the time? Really good question. I do blog. I blog for She Reads. I blog a little bit on my personal site. I don't have blog regret because I don't blog about personal things too often, and I never blog about things that involve other people or that would embarrass friends or family or would put anybody in an uncomfortable situation. And my blogging for She Reads is all about books. It's about what I've read or a novel that I've loved or the actual writing process. So it's a little bit different. It's not as overly personal, but it's really interesting. I have found that blogging, book blogging in particular, has made me a better writer because I have my finger on the pulse of what readers are reading and what they're responding to and the kind of books that they like and that they the actual things they're going into the bookstore to read. So it keeps me very aware of market trends and tastes of readers, and I think that's valuable as a novelist. Oh, Mary Beth has lost connection. That's very sad. But I'm here, so ask questions, keep them coming. I can talk to you about anything, really. So let's see. I guess. Oh, Crystal, do you read your reviews? If so, how do you feel if you get one that paints your work in a non-flattering light? Do you get discouraged? Yes and no to all the questions. I read some reviews in the weeks surrounding the book coming out, especially with the larger trade reviews like People Magazine and New York Times, that kind of thing. I read them quite a bit because I wanted to know what was happening and the response people were having to the book. Since then, I have slowed down quite a bit. And these days, I have a deal with my husband. Um, he's very interested in the Amazon reviews or Goodreads. I don't read those at all. But if he finds one that he likes or one that he considers ludicrous, he'll read it to me. And so that way I still kind of know what's going on, but I don't have to subject myself to the actual reviews every day. Um, and let's see, she also asked how I feel if somebody paints my work in a non-flattering light. It happens, and it's happened to me quite a bit. I've gotten some really bummer reviews from people that didn't like the book or didn't understand it, or it just wasn't their cup of tea. It really bothered me at first because it's something I created and put into the world, but as time has gone on and there's a little bit of distance between me and publication date, I've learned to shrug and just acknowledge that this is part of the writing life. Reading is subjective, and critics, especially at large review sites, get a lot of material. And it's okay. It's okay if somebody doesn't like my work. I'm not happy about it, but it's okay.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Oh, there she is. Yes, I can hear you. Yay. Um,
Maybe
Rita
the old
asked,
computer
do you have
turn
any?
it off and start it again.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm actually kind of amazed that mine has cooperated so far. Um, Rita asked if I have any bad writing habits, chewing on pencils, spilling coffee on your papers. Okay, this is somewhat strange, but it's my worst habit. I have found if I'm sitting in my living room and if I'm comfortable, I don't write. I putz around on the computer or I waste time on social media. There's something about sitting at a desk or a table in a hard chair in a physical posture of work that will make me work. Um, but if I'm too comfortable or snuggle up on the couch, I just don't do it. So on a serious writing day, I have to sit at the table or I have to come in my room here and sit at my little desk to get anything done. But I don't chew on pencils. Like I said, just too much coffee. Um, oh, Jade asked, your book is inspired by a real life unsolved mystery. What drew you to this story, and when did you have the idea to write a book based off of it? Very great question. I'm glad you asked it. This story has an actual specific moment in time when it began. My second son was 2 weeks old, and I had come out of the room and checked the news that morning, and there was a link online that said, has the mystery of Judge Crater been solved? And I thought, I don't know. Click the link, let's find out. And the article went on to explain about the judge and how he'd gone missing and how his disappearance had become the biggest missing persons case of the 20th century. And it was all very interesting, and I was fascinated. But when I got to the end of that article, there was one paragraph at the end, and it described his wife, Stella, how every year on the anniversary of her husband's disappearance, she went to a bar in Greenwich Village, and she would sit in this corner booth, and she would order two drinks, and she would toast her dead husband, and she'd raise one of the drinks, and she would say, "To Joe, wherever you are." And then she'd drink it. She'd get up and she'd walk out and leave the other drink untouched on the table. And I remember the little hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and I thought, whoa, that's not grief, that's penance. And of course, the question pops in my mind. I thought, what if she knew what happened to him? And what if, for some reason, she never told? The story cropped up from that moment, and I couldn't ever get that image out of my mind. Stella sitting in that corner booth with that drink, toasting her missing husband for 40 years. It was very compelling to me. Connie wants to know if it made me nervous to write about the mafia. For instance, that they're a hands-off group not to be stirred up. Yes and no. I mean, you never want to make anybody angry or portray somebody inaccurately. But for me, because I was taking something that had really happened in history and I was recreating the events around it, and the events themselves in my particular book are very much about the women that Joseph Prater left behind. And so the mafia, while very much a part of what is happening in the story, they were kind of happening out here. Um, and all of the characters and the events that I wrote about are they're records of history. I didn't make anything up. I didn't um, introduce people that weren't part of the actual narrative. So I felt very much safe in that regard, just sticking to the history. This is what happened. This is my idea of what could have been happening within that time frame. It was a little bit nerve wracking, but not too bad. Yes, yes. Oh, thank you, Edie. Um, there are book club questions. If you go to doubleday.com and on the front page you can click on my book, scroll down, and there's a reader's guide at the end, and my editor wrote the questions, and she actually did a fabulous job summarizing the book and coming up with thought-provoking questions. You can print them off, they're free, super easy to get, and I would suggest that because I thought she did a very good job with those questions. Oh, okay. um, Tech editor who's at work. Thank you for joining us on your lunch hour, I presume. She wants to know what is fact and what is fiction. In particular, did the maid and the mistress really exist, or did you make them up? Great question. Everybody in this novel existed, with the exception of three characters that I made up. But the wife, the maid, and the mistress, they were all real. There's quite a bit in the historical record about Stella. She was clearly there. The mistress, Sally Lou Ritz, they called her Ritzy. She was also an actual person. She really existed. She really was with Joseph Prater on the night he disappeared. And she had quite a bit to play in the historical record. She was interviewed and questioned quite a bit by the police and the grand jury afterwards. And the maid also was a real person. Of all three characters, however, she's the one that we know the least about. Her name was actually mentioned one time in a newspaper article, and she was in the creator's apartment in the days surrounding the judge's disappearance, which is why I used her in the story. I thought it would be very fascinating to have one of the narrators be somewhat invisible to the rest of the world, but she was there and she knew so much. And in a lot of ways, the maid would have kept the secrets for that family. What shows am I watching? Any guilty pleasures? Oh, Mary Beth, I know is going to relate to this. Sherlock, the current rendition of Sherlock on PBS with Martin Freeman and Benedict Cumberbatch is my absolute guilty pleasure, and it makes me crazy that each season is only 3 shows long and comes along every couple years. But It's brilliant. It's so good. And the part of my mind that loves mysteries absolutely geeks out with every episode. Would you say that's true, Mary Beth, for you as well?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Great show.
Fantastic.
My husband just watched. Go ahead.
Oh, I'll answer that. Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Oh no, my husband just watched Turned. It's a new AMC show that just aired over the weekend, and it is about the Revolutionary War and spies, and it made me think of you, Ariel, and your love of history.
I'll have to look it up. I've not heard of that one.
It just premiered this past weekend.
Very good to know. I will write it down. Mary Beth is very good at telling me what I should watch, and I always take her advice, as I do with all things that she tells me to do. JJT wants to know if there's any interest from TV or it's usually true. Is there any interest from TV or movie producers in filming the book? Yes and no. Nothing. Film stuff is so hard, and even when there is interest, it rarely comes to fruition. There's a little bit of interest from a handful of television producers, but nothing has come of it yet. It'd be fun to see on screen, I think. I'd watch it. Would I rather have a zombie apocalypse or an alien invasion? Probably go for the aliens, because zombies are just really gross. The whole Walking Dead thing does nothing for me, but at least aliens, that's something new. Ask them where they came from. What's the best advice I've ever gotten when it comes to writing? One thing, write the book. It is so easy to talk about writing the book and want to write the book and researching the book and imagining that one day when there's time, I'll write the book. But the person that told me to sit down and just write it, it is the truest, best advice I've ever heard, because there's nothing else without the book. There's no career without the book, and there's no rewriting, and there's nothing. And that's the hardest thing every time, is to sit down and actually write the book. Favorite novel of all time? Oh, that's hard. Kind of impossible, actually.
You top 5.
I don't know that this is my favorite novel of all time, but it's probably the one that had the most impact on me and set me on the path that I'm on now. Would probably be Agatha Christie's novel Murder on the Orient Express. I read it when I was 12, and I remember being stunned. I remember sitting there being absolutely stunned that she'd given me all the information I needed to solve the mystery, and I hadn't done it. And I loved her for fooling me, and it's why I love mysteries to this day. Which character is most like me? Oh, person switched. The first question is, what character is most like me, personality-wise? I'd have to say the Mistress. She's just really spunky, and she has a mind of her own, and she does what she wants, and I liked that about her. The moral stuff aside, I'm nothing like her on a moral plane, but I liked her personality. I could no longer read books or write them. What would I do with my time? I would cook. I love to be in the kitchen. I love making food. I love baking. I love creating something out of nothing, I guess, in a way. Writing and cooking are very similar. You take all of these different elements and put them together and make a new thing. But if I couldn't write, I'd be cooking a whole lot more. Mary Beth, did you have any questions?
I'm finding you some questions.
Okay. Daniel asked, what's the most difficult thing I found out while writing a book? The most difficult thing I found out is that writing a book is hard, and it always seems like it's going to be easy when you get the new idea and you think that's going to be the book that is easy and fun, but it's hard every single time. There always comes a moment when you feel like you're writing the worst book that's ever been written, um, and pushing through that is the hardest thing. What am I reading now? Lots of things. Gosh, I'm looking at my shelf here. I am working my way through the entire Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. I love them, but it takes time because the books are very long. Mary Beth and I do a lot of reading for She Reads. I'm currently reading several books for consideration on that. Really, one of the most fun things I'm reading is a series I'm reading to my children at night. It's the Inkheart trilogy by Cornelia Funk, and I can't remember the last time I had so much fun reading a book just in general, but much less out loud to my children. We're having a blast with that. How often do I write, and do I have a schedule? Oh, I wish I had a schedule, and I wish that I wrote every day. I don't. Terrible as that is to admit, I tend to write when I have white space on the calendar. It's gotten quite a bit easier now that 3 of my 4 kids are in school, and I've gotten much better about catching the story every day. I tend to do a lot of writing on nights and weekends still. I'm trying to get better about doing that during the day. But I think this is a dilemma common to any writer who has young children is you have to navigate those hours when you're awake and at home. And I do that the best that I can. And I've learned that the best writing time is the time that's in front of me. And instead of wishing for a perfect schedule and wishing for everything to line up, I've gotten really good at taking advantage of the time when it's in front of me. I Kinsey wants to know if I got emotional when I concluded writing. I did in a different way for each of the 3 main characters. All of their stories end in such different ways, and it was very cathartic to sit there and realize that to a certain degree I had done all of this to them, and what they were dealing with on their final pages was as a result of the story that I'd taken them through. But I got choked up when I wrote each of those last scenes, and it was fun to me because they'd become real people at that point. Ah, what do I think about ebooks and social media and the changing book world? On one hand, I'm of 2 minds when it comes to ebooks because on one hand, I think in a strange way, it's taught us to price books like we would a pack of gum, very low. And as somebody that spends years writing a book, it's very strange to me to know that a novel could be devalued in that way. So that's one part of my mind. And then the other part of my mind is really, really, really grateful for ebooks and for the fact that they're significantly less in price than a paperback or a hardcover because you find new readers. And it's a reality that people pay attention to price point, and it's a struggling economy, and people make their decisions based on price. And I think we do find a lot of new readers who are willing to take a chance on us on an ebook when they wouldn't in a hardcover. And that's a wonderful thing. And I'm really, really grateful that so many readers have found my book via the ebook version. And so it's a double-sided coin for me, good and bad. Social media is great. You can interact with people that are reading your book in real time, and that's really fun to see their responses to it as they're reading. It's also a time suck. I find myself on Facebook or Twitter when I should be writing, and that's hard to maintain and control. Um, but it's not just the book world that's changing, the world in general is changing. And I think it's kind of crazy to wish that it wouldn't or try to stop it. You just adapt to what's in front of you and be thankful that people are reading at all.
I think that I know all the questions that you were asked when I was on mute for quite a while. So I think I've posted all the questions we have. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to pop them up there, and I'll get them in Ariel. Meantime, Ariel, anything you have to say about?
Oh, you are breaking up on me again. Oh, do I have a favorite Broadway show? Oh gosh. It's funny. This is a really strange confession to make, considering that so much of the book and Ritzy's character in particular was about Broadway. Um, I love music. I love music. I listen to it all the time. It's musicals, however, in general are an art form that I'm less familiar with. I haven't seen many of them. I loved Cats. I thought that was fantastic. I've never actually been to Broadway and watched a show live. It's on my bucket list. I would absolutely love to do. But musicals are one of those things that I'm slowly educating myself with. I've just never had an opportunity to see many of them. And it's an art form that fascinates me, but I'm less familiar with than many other art forms. Oh, they are telling us that we are out of time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thanks for hanging out with me and Mary Beth. It's fun. I'm glad to do it.
Yep, it was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.